Well, welcome back to this special edition of BBC World News America, live from Tokyo. I'll give you a quick recap of what's happened overnight. Relief workers at the Fukushima power plant went back into the plant despite high levels of radiation, but then abandoned their work this morning to allow helicopters to go back in and drop some more seawater, especially on reactors 3 and 4, which are causing most concern. There is still work on the power line to try and get those generators up and running. That is still not successful, even though we thought yesterday at about this time that it might be. And of course there are big questions just about everywhere, not just in this country but in the world, about the future of any nuclear energy program. Let's go to our correspondent Martin Patience live in Beijing. Martin, in China they thought that nuclear was the future. They were planning to build something like 27 new power plants, and that is now on hold. That's a big deal, isn't it, for China?
Well, that's right, it is a big deal. China suspended approval of all new nuclear power plants. Now, by some estimates, the country was going to build more than 100 new nuclear reactors in the next few years. That's by far and away the largest number of reactors being built by any country. The Chinese authorities currently say they're carrying out checks on existing reactors as well as the 30 or so currently under construction. Now, China, like Japan, suffers from earthquakes. Some of its nuclear reactors are located in the coast, which means they're liable to tsunamis. So with the situation in Japan, certainly for now, the Chinese authorities are acting with caution.
It was interesting, Martin. I was struck on the television by how much outpouring of sympathy there's been in China for Japan, especially considering that these two countries, these two neighbours, haven't always got on terribly well in the last year. But do the Chinese authorities think that they're getting enough reliable information from the authorities here about what's going on at the power plant?
Well, no, I think there is concern over that point. We heard yesterday from the Chinese Foreign Ministry, and what they said was they wanted more information quickly and accurately, which I think underscores this point that there is concerns around the world that perhaps the Japanese authorities are underplaying the issue of radiation. Although the situation for in China at the moment, the authorities say that radiation is normal in the country. That said, there has been panic buying of iodine salt that many people here falsely believe that could ward off the effects of radiation. All of that said, I think the situation in China is one of concern, although there is calm here, although I think the Chinese authorities are watching the situation in Japan very, very carefully, because if there was some kind of catastrophic breakdown at that nuclear plant, then perhaps China could be in the firing line in terms of radiation.
Indeed, Martin Patience, thanks very much. And apparently there was panic buying of salt in Beijing this morning and yesterday because salt contains iodine, and that apparently helps against radiation. Anyway, in the United States, of course, they're also watching very closely what's going on here in Japan, not least because they've had their own similar experience with the 3 Mile Island partial meltdown in Pennsylvania in 1979, at the time of the Carter administration. For a look at the comparisons between that disaster and this one, here's Paul Adams.
By the banks of the Susquehanna River, a nuclear plant quietly getting on with its powerful business. But standing mute next door, a ghostly reminder of 4 terrifying days in 1979.
Substantial release of radiation into the atmosphere.
Reactor number 2 suffered a partial meltdown.
Please stay indoors with your windows closed.
At the time, 7 years before Chernobyl, this was the world's worst nuclear accident.
You can hear each time a radioactive thing goes through right here, it reads it.
Mary Stamos Osborne still lives in nearby Harrisburg, so traumatized by the accident that she still monitors radiation levels in and around her house. Her memories of that day are vivid.
The air was filled with metal, and you couldn't tell if you were breathing it or tasting it or eating it. It was just incredible.
With events in Japan bringing back all the old fears, the president has offered this reassurance.
We have a responsibility to learn from this event and to draw from those lessons to ensure the safety and security of our people. That's why I've asked the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to do a comprehensive review of the safety of our domestic nuclear plants in light of the natural disaster that unfolded in Japan.
But on Capitol Hill this week, debate about the wisdom of pursuing nuclear energy. Some lawmakers calling for a moratorium on new projects.
It's a mistake to dismiss risk as being too improbable, and then we find out that those risks are not just improbable, but they do happen. And when it comes to something like nuclear, it can be quite catastrophic.
America gets 20% of its electricity from nuclear reactors, but the country's widely predicted nuclear renaissance has yet to materialize. Electricity is cheap, reactors are not. The accident is commemorated. The plaque says it led to basic changes in the way the industry is run. But it's taken a long time for nuclear power to recover its reputation.
We have the trust, and we know that we need to continue to earn it every day by operating this plant safely and by being open and honest with the public.
This place has come to symbolize the fears that many people have about the safety of nuclear power generation. But over time, those fears have receded. Last year, an opinion poll found that 62% of Americans supported the nuclear industry. Clearly, events on the other side of the world could change all that. Paul Adams, BBC News, at 3 Mile Island.
Now, Japan and California are separated by a vast ocean, but when it comes to the nuclear industry, they're too close for comfort. Rather like Japan, California has earthquakes, it lies on the San Andreas Fault, it could have tsunamis, and it has lots of nuclear power plants. Here's our correspondent Rajesh Merchandani.
The earthquake has started here. Here's a
At this university, they're testing the holy grail for seismologists.
Very strong. Shaking expected in 6 seconds.
So this is the technology that you developed?
Yes, this is the current state of our technology, yes.
It's a prototype of an early warning system for earthquakes. Data from a network of seismic monitors throughout California is analysed instantaneously, and an alert sent out faster than the earthquake travels. A similar system gave people in Tokyo 30 seconds warning before the shaking hit them, but it cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and US scientists say economic realities mean their work is years from completion.
It's really a matter of resources. If we had more funding, we would put more programmers on this problem, and you'd see much faster progress.
Meanwhile, this is how some here are preparing for possible radioactive fallout from Japan by buying up stocks of anti-radiation pills. Even though officials insist levels will be too low to be harmful, many want to be extra sure. And how ready are West Coasters for a tsunami? Well, this is an active earthquake zone, and they're constantly reminded the big one is coming. The terrible scenes from Japan struck a deep chord here on America's west coast, and much has already been learned. Scientists are understanding a great deal more about how future tsunamis might affect communities here. Governments are being reminded just how easily fear can spread, and individuals are realizing they need to be better prepared themselves. Close to the beach, this family takes the quake threat seriously. They store water under the house and keep a well-stocked emergency bag. But now they wonder, is it enough?
I feel that we're pretty prepared, for an earthquake, but I don't know what you can do about nuclear radiation or, fallout and that kind of mad, crazy rush of water that they got in the tsunami in Sendai. That was really scary.
This is a pleasure seeker's coast, living with the threat of danger. Japan's disaster has brought new fears. Rajesh Merchandani, BBC News in California.
This is one of the biggest and busiest megacities in the world, but parts of Tokyo are beginning to look like a ghost town as people are fleeing the threat of radiation. And here's the big question. If and when will Japan's famous patience turn into panic? It all depends on fixing a cooling system at a nuclear reactor about 150 miles north of here, and of course on the levels of radiation in the air around me. More from Katy in Washington and the rest of the day's news after the break. But that's all from me here in Tokyo.